And as always, super excited to roll into this next hour with you all. I'm already vibing with my guest speaker, and I can't wait to connect with him after this conversation, as I hope that you all will reach out to him as well. He's going to drop a lot of knowledge. But before we get started, I just want to go over some quick housekeeping rules so that we feel comfortable and confident on this call together. I like to remind us, even though we don't need any reminders, that the world is crazy these days. Seems like everything is topsy-turvy. Seems like the world is on fire. With that said, you could be doing anything else with your time, but you're deciding to be intentional with us and be with us for the next hour. So with that said, please participate. We encourage you to participate. Even if you're rewatching this video later and you're not live with us, you can participate by taking notes, closing your tabs, stop multitasking, and be present with us for the next hour. If you're live with us, I would love to invite you to turn your cameras on. This is a safe digital space. I really pride myself in making sure that we have a safe digital space here to share our journeys and just, encourage each other and uplift each other. So feel free to turn your cameras on if you feel called to do so. I know that digital fatigue and camera fatigue are real, so no pressure there. You don't need to if you don't want to, but I just wanted to extend the invitation. Also, we would love to have you participate by writing in the chat box whenever you have something that comes to mind. If it's a question or reflection or a dream that you had last night, go ahead and use the chat box so that we can make sure that you're participating there. And I will flag whatever you bring up in the chat box to our guest speaker. Also, please hop off mute whenever you have something that you want to share. We want to hear from you. We want you to share your voice. So I've muted everyone upon entrance just to avoid any background noise, but I can't stress enough, we want to hear from you. So feel free to just hop off mute whenever you want to chime in. And let's try to be respectful and have one person off of mute at a time. If anyone has any sensitive information and you prefer to be kept anonymous in your reflection or your question, please find me in the chat box under Mariella Marie. You can write to me privately and I'll flag your question or your reflection to our guest speaker and keep you anonymous. This is being recorded, so if you do hop off mute, you will be featured in our live recording that if you're joining us live and you signed up for this conversation, be looking out for a rewatch email with the link to this video so that you can share with your community, you can share with your family and friends, and they can rewatch this. Maybe you can watch it together and take notes. The last thing I'll say is we'd love for you to follow us on socials and subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can keep up with all the great chats we've got in store. With that said, I'm just going to take a second to introduce myself. If this is the first time that you're joining a chat where I'm moderating, hello and welcome. I've recently changed my photo here because I could finally do a physical event. I'm so used to saying virtual events now. I could finally do a physical event here in Patagonia where I decided to just pimp out my face mask. That kind of explains. Some people get right to me privately and ask, what's the deal with that? So I just wanted to just kind of get that elephant out of the room there. I really love speaking about the importance of emotional intelligence at home, at play, and in the workplace. So I might bring some of my reflections there. If anyone who's on the call with us wants to philosophize on the emotional intelligence spectrum, feel free to philosophize with me. And then I would love for you to support the project that I'm working on that is called the Positive Force Team. You can go to thepositiveforceteam.org, sign up for our newsletter, or I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to our guest speaker. Sunjata, please let us know a little bit about yourself, how you came to learn about Power to Fly, and what you're excited to share with us today.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Everyone that's here with us live and everyone that's watching the recording. I'm grateful to receive this opportunity to share with you all. I'm Sunjata. Sunjata is my chosen name. I've gone by that name since 2018, and it means sun lion. So, and it means sun lion in Mandinka, to be more specific. And Mandinka is an indigenous West African tribe that spanned throughout several what are now bordered countries. But prior to that, it was just a tribe that spanned throughout West Africa. So with that said, I am a conflict resolution, and thriving culture specialist. In addition to that, I consider myself an anti-oppression facilitator, content creator, and organizer. So I organize both in communities, local community with people, as well as an extended network of intentional communities, as well as within corporations. I bring the practice of authentic dialogue to teams to help them to collaborate, and resolve conflict in ways that strengthen relationships. And I also see that as anti-oppression work, because when authentic dialogue isn't present in a corporate space, oftentimes people are silenced. People aren't able to fully express themselves and be heard, and they experience feelings of oppression in the space. So that's how I bring my anti-oppression work into corporate spaces. So with that being said, I have a doctorate degree in organizational leadership and over 20 years of experience as an entrepreneur, an educator, a social change agent, and an organizational leader. So basically, I say all that to say that my consultation and facilitation work are informed by both theory and practice. I roll my sleeves up. I've done the things I teach. So that's a little bit more about who I am.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I know that we are going to roll through this hour, and you are going to share more of your journey, more of the things that you can bring to the forefront as you have, as you said, been rolling your sleeves up on the streets, doing the work that you're saying that you're doing. So feel free to bring any of that into the conversation today. You all have submitted some great questions previous to this conversation, and we're going to take those questions one by one. But Sunjata, I would love for you to set the stage by letting us know the principal themes for today's conversation.
Sure. So the principal themes, I first want to start with talking about the difference between debate, discussion, and authentic dialogue. So, we've grown up in a society where debate is the norm. That's the communication framework. That's the norm. In schools, we have debate clubs, right? And on the grand stage, we see our politicians debating in order to win votes and to, gain power, right? And influence. So we've grown up seeing debate as that standard, for communication. And unfortunately, debate is often rooted in elements that are divisive. So I'll start by saying that debate is often oppositional. Two or more sides oppose each other and attempt to prove each other wrong, find flaws, and make counter arguments. In debate, winning is the only goal. Okay. Another way that shows up oftentimes is through power relationships. Whereas oftentimes when it comes to decisions being made, oftentimes the person who gets the final say is the person who has the most power, whether traditionally it would be the man of the house or the boss or the manager, right? Or the teacher, or et cetera. And or in a debate-based situation, a person that tends to be more extroverted, more of a quick thinker and assertive, they always have an advantage in a debate-based situation. And that others silences and oppresses those among us who may be more introverted or who are more reflective in how they process information, and they give it some time before they respond. It doesn't mean that their response is any less valuable, but in a debate-based situation, that person is at an extreme disadvantage, and oftentimes they won't even speak. And that will build up resentment over time. So those are some of the elements of debate that we've kind of grown accustomed to, and it's the norm in our society. And when I say our society, I know that we have an international audience, so I'm speaking based on my experiences here in the United States or colonized, countries, and in a space that's colonized that is run based on these principles. So let's talk about discussion. In a discussion, what a discussion is more of a civil form of debate where opposing viewpoints are presented, analyzed, and then defended. Then participants decide which one is the best. In a discussion, the participants want their own views to be accepted by the others involved. The focus is still on winning rather than on learning. So again, it's a more civil form of debate. So in a discussion, you'll tend to create space for one another. You'll see people, or if you're involved in a discussion, you won't see in a debate where oftentimes people are cutting each other off in a debate, and therefore tensions tend to escalate when we're having a debate. In a discussion, people are more civil. They listen to one another, they give each other space, they ask questions, and they analyze. Ultimately, though, the goal is still winning. And the goal is still to have my point of view be the point of view that we adopt and move and accept going forward for whatever decision is trying to be made in that moment. Is everyone with me? Does that make sense? Okay. So let's talk about what an authentic dialogue is and how it's different. So in an authentic dialogue, people agree to freely explore issues, listen deeply to one another, and surface, display, and inquire into their own assumptions so that they and others can reflect on them. The purpose of an authentic dialogue is to go beyond any one person's understanding. In an authentic dialogue, we're not trying to win. We all win if we're doing it right. So one of the key points that I love to make about authentic dialogue is the idea of surfacing and displaying our assumptions, almost like suspending it out in front of you, not only for you to observe, but for others to observe. And when we take the time to observe our thoughts and reflect on our thoughts and assumptions and allow other people to do the same, there's a magic that happens where we get to the underlying root feelings, assumptions, fears, concerns behind those thoughts. And that brings people together. It's an amazing feeling when you get to experience it. So I'll stop there to see if there's any questions, any comments before I move on to our next theme.
Again, feel free to hop off mute, write in the chat box. I'll just flag some things folks are already writing in the chat box.
Okay.
Makes absolute sense. Very interesting. I realized that I had never met anyone who understood the importance of having authentic dialogue before I met my person. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Great overview of differences between the three. Yes, please continue to walk us through to set the stage up. This is an incredible framing. So useful. Great. So we are with you. Please continue.
Awesome. All right. So let's talk about the three skills, the three foundational skills. And authentic dialogue is a communications framework and a skill set and a tool set that is layered and there's depth to it. But at the very top intro level, there's three skills that need to be adopted. And those are empathetic listening, empathetic questioning, and tolerance. So empathetic listening is listening with the intent to understand both the other person's perspective and their feelings. All of your attention is on the other person. Listening empathetically requires using more than just your ears. It relies on many of your senses, seeing, hearing, feeling, and your intuition. Effective empathetic listening sends the message that I understand your problem and how you feel about it. What you are saying is important to me, and I am not judging you, even if you don't agree with the person's stance or perspective. You still can listen empathetically and listen to understand deeply. The next foundational skill is empathetic questioning. So empathetic questioning requires asking open-ended questions that do not lead, and they have the following characteristics. They're focused on learning more about the individual, not about satisfying a need of the asker. They are asked neutrally, without any emotional charge, hidden suggestion, assumptions, or contradictory body language from the asker. They require some thought and reflection. They promote insight, and they uncover opinions and feelings. So some examples of empathetic questions can be, tell me more about that. How did that make you feel? Why is that important to you? Or I'll give you one more. Let's see. Can you expand on your last statement, please? So here's what I've come to learn about empathetic questions. One, immediately, when you take the time to listen to someone empathetically and not cut them off and actually let them finish what they have to say, and then you ask a question to allow them the opportunity to expand and go deeper into how they feel, it triggers something in them to let them know that you truly care. You're truly here to truly understand them. And what this process does, is it de-escalates tension. Debate escalates tension because, again, we're competing. We're trying to one up, right? But authentic dialogue de-escalates tension. It allows us to resolve conflict peacefully. So another thing that I've learned through this process is that when someone feels like they've been heard and someone feels like they truly are understood, it is so much easier to find common ground. It is so much easier to agree on a solution when people feel heard and understood. The wall comes down that people generally have up when there's conflict. So then the final foundational skill is tolerance. So tolerance is the ability to tolerate the existence or endure the existence of behaviors or beliefs that you don't necessarily agree with. Tolerance is accepting that we are all unique and complex as individuals, and it relieves us of the stress of feeling like everyone must be the same. The beautiful thing about authentic dialogue that I've learned is that our beliefs don't have to compete. Like, you literally do not have to give up what you believe in order for us to find some common ground and find solutions that we both can consent to. It's a process to getting there, and all parties have to agree to engage in authentic dialogue. And I know we'll probably talk more about that, but I've seen it happen over and over again when I've had an opportunity to facilitate authentic dialogues in different settings. So the last theme is, how to resolve conflicts in a way that builds trust and strengthens relationships. So I kind of touched on it throughout the first two themes, but there's a process towards the end. So within the authentic dialogue, you can have two intentions, okay? One intention can literally just be to explore an idea or an issue, to explore, to gain deeper understanding of different perspectives, and just be an inquiry and reflection with one another, in community with others, whether it be coworkers, whether it be family members, whether it be intentional community members. It works in any context. So that's the intention. And through that comes a collective intelligence. There's a process of thinking together. The other intention for authentic dialogue could be to resolve conflict and propose solutions. So the way I teach it is, after going through rounds of listening, speaking and listening empathetically, asking clarifying questions, asking empathetic questions, etc., coming to some common ground, then you get into a solutions round where solutions are proposed that take into account what everyone has shared. And then from there, you offer proposals in rounds, and take turns offering proposals until you come up with something that everyone can feel good about trying out and consenting to. So that's a very brief explanation of the process. But again, once you've gone through the other steps for authentic dialogue, you'll find that that solutions series round is so much simpler to get to solutions that everyone can agree to, because everyone feels like they've been heard and understood.
Thank you so much, Sunjata. This is such important work that you are sharing with us today. And I want to just dive right into these questions that folks have submitted previous to this moment here, so that we can make sure that we try to cover as many as we can. We have lots of beautiful questions that you all have submitted, but we still want to hear if any questions come up. In the moment, our guest speaker has just dropped a lot of knowledge to set the stage. So maybe you have some questions that you didn't get to submit previous to the chat. Again, write those into the chat box, or feel free to hop off mute. I will be having some intentional moments where we hold for a light pause to invite people to hop off mute if some people need that encouragement. So please listen out to that. Actually, we have a question already from Christy. So, is consensus the goal of the solutions round? What if it is not achieved? Great question.
Yes. So in the consensus round, the goal is to come up with a solution that is good enough for now and safe enough to try. So what's powerful about that statement, good enough for now and safe enough to try, is that ultimately we're trying to get into everyone's range of tolerance, okay? A decision that you can live with trying it out, okay? Because we understand that the only constant in our world is change, right? So it's acknowledging up front that we need to make a solution that we can try out, and then we'll have an opportunity to come back to the table later to discuss if it worked out or not, what needs to be tweaked so that it still feels good and no one feels oppressed from that decision. So it's not necessarily your number, it may not be your number one your personal number one choice, but it isn't bumping up against any of your personal boundaries either. You're trying to find that middle ground where it's not bumping up against your boundaries. It may not be your number one choice, but it's within the safe zone, the safe enough to try zone. Does that make sense?
I'm going to hold for a light pause to see if someone wants to hop off mute, just to reflect on all the things we've covered so far. So feel free to hop off mute if anyone wants to chime in. If not, we can roll into these questions. It makes sense for me. Thank you so much for unraveling that. And I find, I mean, something that really strikes me, a lot of the work that I'm doing personally, and also in the work that I do with the Positive Force team, is, you know, figuring out ways to decolonize the mind, body, and our subtle bodies that we all share collectively. And, you know, it's interesting that debate is really, I don't know, a lost art. I would even say it's been kind of, as you were saying in the beginning, it is very polarized. It creates more distance. It shows, you know, how we are let. It doesn't highlight how we are more alike than we are different. So I really love that you're setting the stage with this um, collective intelligence. Yes.
Mhm.
Thank you
Yes.
so much. Thank you so much. All right. So I did see that someone had their hand raised. Emily, did you want to hop off mute? All right. I will move on to the next question here. Again, feel free to just let me know if you want to hop off mute. Okay. So are there situations where debate or discussion are preferred over dialogue?
All right. So here's my answer to that question. The first thing I'll say is that when you get into a room with people, whatever that group of people consent to, it's okay. So if everyone consents to having a debate, that's cool. There may be situations where, there's context where people want to have a debate for fun, for like the sport of debate, where it is that competition where it's okay for the competition to happen. But if it has to be a situation, if we're talking about being inclusive, and I'm going to weave in DEIB, right? It has to be something that everyone consents to. Like, okay, we're having a debate. But here's another thing that I'll say. If we're talking about the workplace and we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and creating that environment where everyone feels like those things are honored, I don't believe that debate is has a place in the setting that wants to embrace those ideals. Because again, debate is about competition. It's about one-upping. It's about power over and control in a lot of ways. So I don't think there's a place for debate in a setting that is truly trying to build, collaboration around those values. So in terms of discussion, yes, I think that there is a place for discussion. Again, if the context for what your culture is has been established and everyone has consented to it, and there's a thriving culture around who has what decision-making power, and everyone again has bought into and consented to those things, and someone has a task that they're leading and they want to gather some thoughts, opinions, and perspectives about a decision that has to be made, and they want to have a discussion about that where they want people to bring their opinions and perspectives and kind of amplify them and kind of pound the table on what they believe. And then it's up to that. They've entrusted that person that they've given the power within that group to make the final decision based on the input. I think there is a place for discussion in those moments. So I hope that answers that question.
And there's actually a follow-up question here in the chat box. Christy writes, sounds like modeling this method in a corporate work environment will require planning for a slower process to make decisions until it becomes a norm. Would you like to reflect on that?
Yes, absolutely. So when I'm working with corporate clients, currently my team and I are working with the Fortune 50 company, one of the largest companies around the world. And one of the things that we share with them is that you have to slow down to go fast, because oftentimes in the corporate environment, they're burn and churn. burn and churn, go, 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 do, make decisions fast, make decisions fast, etc. And they don't see that down the line, there's going to be some consequences for continuing to operate in that manner. Those consequences can be employee burnout. Those consequences can be a lack of psychological safety in the workplace. Those consequences can be attrition, etc. All the things that entities like Power to Fly, you all hold these events to kind of influence change to get away from corporations having to continuously experience those things by being more mindful of the human element that exists within the workplace. So we take teams through a process of creating a container for these tools that we give them, one being authentic dialogue, and another tool for decision-making called Change Up, which is an agile decision-making tool that we teach. We absolutely tell them that, yes, we're going to have to slow down. We're going to have to create culture that everyone co-creates together. We take them through an entire process for doing this together. And then once there's buy-in, because everyone feels like their voice is heard, we have inclusion, okay? And then when they're able to have these authentic dialogues, it puts them in a position where they're avoiding some of the things that I just mentioned around, not having psychological safety, avoiding attrition because people don't feel like they belong, avoiding the mistakes that happen because there's a lack of communication or people are afraid to speak up. All these things are totally designed out of a culture that embraces authentic dialogue.
So I'm just curious to just, weave in some real-time happenings. I'm not sure if folks on the line know that yesterday Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp went offline for several hours. I am a firm believer that, not to call the irresponsibility of tech companies, that's a whole nother topic. I believe that the digital space is being colonized, and I think that we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we're being more responsible in the way that we engage in social media. Actually, I watched a recent debate that the Social Dilemma team, who they came out with a very beautiful documentary recently, and they're trying to have hold everyone accountable by creating some change. And they had a debate, and so my first response was great. Yeah, they're bringing Generation Z folks in to debate about this. But then I was like, oh, but the debate for me felt so tense. Like you were saying in the beginning, it just, all of the tension was just so palpable. Well, and then yesterday with the crash, with the collapse, however people are calling it, I was thinking like, how much time are the people who are trying to recover these systems using to practice emotional intelligence, to practice, crafting their own equity lens, and to have authentic dialogue versus like, okay, we need the numbers, we need everything back on, we need the data, we need the. If you could do a brief, make sure this is happening to these people. I don't know if you currently work with these folks, but what would you offer moment of, I think on an international level, on a global level, we have been affected by this offline, usage of Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram. How can those people who are building this technology make sure that they're not just going back into this really fast way of working, which of course excludes a lot of voices being heard and this authentic dialogue? I know I'm asking a lot there, but it's happening now, and I'm just curious to know what you would offer them in this moment.
Yeah, so I would offer them the two tools that I mentioned. So we have a program called Co-Creating a Thriving Team Culture. And within that is learning the paradigm shift of operating the ways that we've conventionally operated versus operating in a way that embraces DEIB, collaboration, empowerment, etc. And what I would offer them and propose and suggest to them is that they create space for authentic dialogues. Literally monthly, they need to carve out 2 hours to come together in committees and groups, depending on the size of the company and the different teams, to have authentic dialogues with one another. And for the purpose of listening and exploring and surfacing issues and getting varying perspectives and learning how to ask each other empathetic questions and listen empathetically to one another and exercise tolerance and surface assumptions, all the things you heard me go through earlier, I would propose that they set aside time for doing that. Because when they do that, again, I spoke about a magic. There's a magic that happens that galvanizes people when they think together that I can't explain. It's something that people have to feel. And it takes visionary leadership to know that this is something that their company needs. Because ultimately what most companies do is that they'll have these vision sessions together and they'll have, DEIB specialists and companies come in and talk about the importance of these things and some things that they need to be aware of. But ultimately, people will, over time, they'll snap back into the old habits. What is the accountability measure to maintain all the good learning that you've had as a company and as a team going forward? It's having monthly authentic dialogues, and it's having monthly change up, what we call change up sessions or culture shifting sessions. And in that session, what we do is we take the vision and the values that a company has worked on together, and we craft a culture statement together if they don't already have one. And then that culture statement is front and center whenever we come for a change up meeting. Okay. And then what we ask everyone is to bring forth awarenesses in our day-to-day and their day-to-day operations that aren't aligned with their culture that they said that they wanted to create. Now, again, you have to slow down and set meetings for this to happen. And everyone gets a chance to go into an authentic dialogue about the awarenesses that were brought forth that show that we're misaligned. We're currently acting in ways that are misaligned with the things that we said we want to be, with our values, et cetera. How do we get back aligned? And then people propose solutions. And every time we come back to that change up meeting, we check on the solutions that were proposed. We tweak it if anything needs to be tweaked, and then we move it along a continuum. There's a whole tool that we use to make this happen. And we teach teams and organizations how to use. And all it does is literally keeps them aligned because the winds of change are always happening. So the crash was a wind, that was a wind blew, right? A force came through. Okay, that was a change. However, through this process that we're talking about, teams, corporations, organizations get to stay aligned because they have language and they have tools to help them make decisions where everyone feels included and empowered and a part of those decisions. And it allows teams to navigate change, endure change, be more resistant and resilient through change, and always at all times, relationships are being strengthened through the process.
Thank you so much. I know I really, I was just really curious. It's been on my mind, obviously, since yesterday. And I was like, okay, part of my work is to be authentic in this conversation of what's happening in social media. And I can't just pretend like this isn't happening and talk about, anything else. So I wanted to figure out a way to implement the great work that you're doing into something that is very visceral right now that is happening on a global level. So I appreciate you.
I want to ask, I know that was like conceptual and I was envisioning it in my mind. I know you can't see what I'm seeing when I'm moving my hands. So does anyone have any questions about the tools that I mentioned? Because I know this is maybe your first time hearing about them. Anyone need any clarity about what I just said? And did it land? Did it make sense? Did I answer your question, Mariella?
Can I respond?
Yes.
So I'm really thinking deeply about what you said and just thinking about the struggles that I have on the workplace and how, because I see how this can work with interpersonal relationships, right? Mm-hmm. But then to change the mindset and try to envision how that would work on the workplace, I realized that it does have to be a community effort. And I did ask a question, as a young Black woman working in a corporate environment, I always feel as though I'm the first one to say something or the first one to draw attention to certain things. And I'm in a new workspace now, and I decided that I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to be the person that has to be a poster child for a situation that I feel that people should clearly understand is not correct. So I'm trying to figure out how I can implement those things without playing the same role that I've played in the workplace in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense, right?
So to clarify, I understand the concern and what you're asking, but what throws me for a loop is that you're saying you don't want to play the role of necessarily being, because where I was going is going to give you some tips on how you can kind of be the change you want to see in your organization.
Yes.
But if you're saying you kind of want to step back and you don't want to be the person,
I'm tired is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Exhausted from like blank stares and people acting as if they don't understand what issues are. So I'm like, oh my God, do I feel like doing this again?
Right.
That's where I am. So that's a different issue, but an issue nonetheless.
Yeah. So it's like two different things. So I'm gonna address them separately. First, I want to say I empathize with what you're dealing with in terms of the exhaustion that you feel with everyone kind of going along with the status quo and not really wanting to step up to really implement the culture change that is really needed to make you feel better about coming to work every day and being a part of the team. I can understand how exhausting that is. So one of the things, the only thing that I can offer is like really, it's two things. It's really about, and I know this is challenging, but it's about getting value aligned. You can either try to continue to make a change where you are, or continue to, in time, over time, kind of work towards getting to a place that is more aligned with the values that you hold, and try to be a part of that team. By, it doesn't feel good, and then you can ask the right questions when you are sitting in interviews to see if they have the culture that, will relieve you of some of that stress and exhaustion. In your current place, what I can offer for you and anyone else who is tired of getting into arguments and power struggles, and when you have to engage with someone who hasn't sat through a chat like this or authentic dialogue training, how can you embody these principles? And I want to give you some tips on how to do that, how to embody these principles to resolve conflict in your one-to-one, relationships at work, whether they be with peers or your leaders. So let's say that in any given situation, tension is present. Okay. Once you notice that tension is present, in order for an authentic dialogue to happen, everyone has to consent. Okay. They have to consent. But again, you're dealing with someone who hasn't sat through a training like this. So here's how you get them to consent. Okay. You step back and you say, listen, I'm going to use your name, Sharice, as an example. Okay. And I'm gonna say, Sharice, I appreciate you bringing this to me. I can feel that, we have some tension here or a disagreement. I don't want to argue. So would it be okay if we listen to one another, give each other a chance to express how we feel, and take turns speaking and listening, and then proposing a solution that we both can feel good about? Would that be okay?
There's no way they can say no to that unless they really want to fight.
Right. Now, here's the next step. It's hard for someone to say no to that, right? But you have to wait for them to say yes, because that's their consent. That's them opting in. Okay. So once they say yes to that, then you say, okay, great. You go first. Now you can model empathetic listening and empathetic questioning. So they get to express themselves and you get to lean in and give them that empathetic listening energy. Right. And let them get heard in ways that they don't necessarily expect that they're going to be heard in the workplace. Then you're going to ask an empathetic question or two to allow them to expand and feel like they're truly heard and you're truly locked in. And when they're done, you're going to say to them, I understand fully. Thank you for expanding. I've just given you a chance to fully express yourself, and I listened and I didn't interrupt. I'm going to ask that you give me the same opportunity to express myself without interruption. Is that okay? Again, you give them the opportunity to say yes. And then you express yourself. You could also say, and I also wanted to make sure that I asked questions to make sure I truly understood your perspective. And I want to ask that you give me the same, opportunity in the same space. Is that okay? Now they're going to say yes. And then you get to speak. And then at the end of that, you've both heard each other's perspectives. And then you said, okay, let's now talk about some solutions that we both can feel good about. And you just literally do the same thing. You listen. And then if it's something you consent to, great, I can do that, because at this point they've heard you, you've heard them. They're going to want to include what you've said and felt in their proposal, and you'll do the same, and you'll have a solution going forward. And you have literally engaged them in an authentic dialogue without them even knowing it, because you set the stage by modeling it first. Does that make sense?
Yes, Crystal.
Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that question. Good luck. You are not alone. We got folks right in the chat box saying that, yes, it is exhausting. And I really hope that this has been useful, and people can, when we finish this conversation, you go and open the stage for authentic dialogue. I would also ask, do you recommend any kind of like breath work, meditative work, writing, journaling to like prepare yourself to not bring so much fire to fuel the tension before having this authentic dialogue? Like what work should one do independently before they meet that person to set the stage?
Absolutely. Whatever you need to do to ground yourself, if you know that you're going to approach someone about some lingering tensions in this way, I definitely recommend, taking a few breaths, meditating, grounding yourself, listening to some music, whatever you need to do to be prepared to have that conversation with someone. I think that's a great idea. Absolutely.
Beautiful. All right. So let's see. We got some chatter happening in the chat box. Great. So we've got, and can you just voice this email as well for folks who might be rewatching this and don't have access to the chat box?
Yes, you can email me at Sundiata, my first name, SUNDIATA @growdialogue.com. If you would like a tip sheet with the steps for engaging someone in an authentic dialogue that hasn't sat through a training. Ideally, you all will love this so much that you'll figure out a way to get your DEI coordinator or your team leader or someone to want to embrace this training for the team. If you have that level of influence, or if you're a leader, we would love to talk about that as well. But at the baseline level, you can use what you're learning right here, right now, to make an impact and be the change that you want to see in your organization.
Beautiful. All right, we've got some things happening in the chat box, but before I read what's in the chat box, would anyone else like to hop off mute and voice a question or reflection? Please do so now if you'd like to. All right, you still have some time. We've got about 15 minutes left, so let's get to Dorothy's question here. Do you have any specific advice for addressing performative activism in the workplace when leadership feels their actions are authentic?
Yes. So for me, this goes back to the tools that I mentioned earlier, where I think that leadership and just in general, everyone means well. When there's something that happens in society, like we saw in our country in 2020, where a heightened level of awareness occurs, or something that in your company happens that brings about a heightened level of awareness where some people are being oppressed by the culture in that company or in society as a whole. And therefore we see this intentional wave of activism, and, words of support. And for some, it may look like window dressing, or for others, they may notice that 6 months down the road, it's gone away. Yeah, we may have a Black Lives Matter logo on our website now. We may have some fancy language in our mission, vision, culture now that addresses it, but it's not manifesting in the day to day. And that's where, I would encourage you and empower you to challenge your leadership to embrace tools that, and I hate to sound salesy, but I don't know of any other way of doing it than the ways that I teach. So whether it's my company or any other company that can teach you on an accountability measure to make sure that you are literally doing the things that you say you want to do consistently throughout, day in and day out, month in and month out, year in and year out. And it's not something that has to be triggered by an incident, that we're proactively living diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I would express to leadership that I'm seeing a gap, I'm seeing a lack of that. And I would ask them, what do they have any ideas for what we can do to ensure that it happens? And if not, maybe you can propose Grow Dialogue or some other company that can provide your company with the tools to make sure that it is not just window dressing. I hope that makes sense. Does that answer your question, Dorothy?
Great. Yes. Dorothy says yes. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Lots of lip service happening. And I actually, in 2020, I gave a talk about the importance of emotional intelligence in the workplace, and just demystifying the Black experience in the workplace. And one of the main things I said is there is no button to end racism. It takes time. And what you are clearly walking us through in this session is that you have to program time. You have to mark your calendar off consistently, because if not, well, 6 months pass and well, there are words on the screen, but nothing is happening internally. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, because I know that the fear is oftentimes we don't want to lose productivity, but it's counterintuitive in that if your team truly feels like they belong and you have a diverse environment and they feel included and there's equity and all these things, your productivity will go up because you'll have more buy-in, you'll have more authenticity showing up on a day-to-day basis. You'll have less turnover. You'll have less apathy in the workplace. You'll have less tension that's robbing you of productivity. So the hours that I'm asking companies to set aside, okay, literally you'll get that back tenfold in productivity and cohesiveness. And that's what the visionary leaders that are on this call, that's what you have to impress upon your team leaders. And if you are a team leader, hopefully you will, offer these type of opportunities to your team on your own, or if you choose to bring in outside help. You will see, hopefully you'll see the value in carving out the time and understanding that it will improve your bottom line over time.
And in a counterculture way, right? Like if we want to really reshape and make some change, we can't do things that people were doing, a century ago, even last year. So of course, the way that we view productivity, I mean, we have to try to balance that and counterbalance that with a different way of seeing the world that is more, in my opinion, decolonized. It's more, being more in touch with your authenticity, so that real change can happen. Otherwise, it's a continued lip service. And then we all hurt each other or hurt ourselves in the process. We've got about 10 minutes left. So I want to just hold again for a light pause to see if someone wants to hop off mute. You've got 10 minutes left to shine, if so. All right. If not, I see someone hopping off. Go for it.
So I just wanted to clarify that this is a process for people who are willing to come to the table, right? But everyone's not going to be willing to come to the table. So do we then prepare ourselves to walk away from those companies? I mean, I know that's been my personal experience. I'm currently located in the south east of the United States, but I'm from the Northeast. And I find the culture down here is very different than what I grew up in, and very set in their ways, in a way that's not affirming to myself as a person or my children as children of color. It's hard to have authentic dialogue with people who don't want to come to the table. So that's sort of the both professionally and personally where I'm at, where I would love, we could have conversations about where do we go from here, and sort of a meeting of minds, but that just does not, and I'm sorry if you can hear Danny Tiger in the background. It's I find there's a lot more hesitation to have authentic dialogue in my current space.
Yes, understood. And what I would say to that is I want to empower you and everyone who has the same pain point to create a proposal. If you have it in you, because I understand what Cherie said earlier, she's tired, but if you have it in you, I would want to empower you to create a proposal that's highlighting the pain points that you and your peers are experiencing as a company and what it continues to lead you to, and then offer a solution and offer development. Does your company have any type of development opportunities? Do they have trainings, and do they bring outside organizations or speakers or trainers in to help improve on the pain points? And once you offer the proposal of this highlights the pain points and what your solution is, if you see that there's no movement, whether it be with your solution or another solution that is aligned with solving the pain points, then I would like to empower you to look elsewhere. To find an organization, a company that is more value aligned with where you are, so that you don't continue to feel drained in what you do. And I understand that that may take time, that's painful, and but it's just a matter of you balancing and deciding what your boundary is on how long you want to endure in your current setting if they aren't showing a willingness, versus the pain of trying to find a new setting and having to make that hard decision. Unfortunately, it is. It's a part of what we have to grapple with. But I just want to empower you and others who have that same issue, to step up and be the change, whether that means creating that proposal and offering it, or finding a place that's more value aligned. And in those interview sessions, if you could offer some of the things that you believe and what you're looking to see, hopefully you can find a place that makes space for those type of things.
And I wanted to add too, I did leave my last space because of that, and it took time, and in my exit interview, they asked, and I had to make a decision as to whether or not I was going to tell them the truth. And I did. And I felt good about it, but they tried to excuse their way out of the bad behavior, which, I left them to hold that back. So I did get some relief from that. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you everyone for sharing. Wow, I wish we had more time to just dive in, but I encourage you all to reach out to this remarkable person who has clearly, just set the stage for us to want to talk beyond the hour that we have allotted for today. But I do want to flag some things that are being dropped in the chat here. Cheryl writes, my work culture is seal tight lips, no dialogue at all from my team for fear of losing their job. It's frustrating and hard to navigate change. Can you briefly comment on that?
Yeah. Again, I just want to bring to the point, I just want to offer encouragement at this stage and letting you all know that, 20 years ago, corporations weren't talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Whereas nowadays, that's the expectation. So that goes to show you that there is movement, right? And unfortunately, change takes time, but there is movement. And in your proposal, if your company doesn't use this language, you can let them know that we're behind the times, right? Because this is what forward-thinking, successful, innovative companies are embedding in their culture, and we're not. What can we do to change that? And I want to help, right? So I would just want to, again, offer you encouragement, offer you, empowerment to know that change is happening, and that all of you can be that next, force to implement more change. Because a lot of people are inside of companies that espouse those terms but aren't living it. And you've heard something today about 2 tools that can help to, move that along. So again, just empowerment and encouragement to know that we can make change even in the face of all the roadblocks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for leaving us on a high note. I actually want to probe you a little bit more because we do have a couple more minutes. Please leave us with some more food for thought. I mean, considering how you were preparing for this hour-long discussion and seeing, some of the live comments that came up throughout and what you've just seen in your work in general, what is your hope for the future? I mean, I know it's pretty clear in how you're working with folks these days. But if you could speak about your utopia a little bit, leave us with some food for thought, and then remind us how we can connect with you when this conversation ends, so that people can support the good work that you're doing and work on themselves a little more.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mariella. Is that all relationships are rooted in and built on a foundation of authentic dialogue. Every relationship in every context, starting with our relationship with ourselves, right? That we surface our own assumptions and opinions and reflect on them about ourselves, and asking the question, are we being authentic with ourselves, or are we accepting someone else's narrative for who we are and who we should be and what our vision for our life should be? And is that causing us to stay in places and stay in relationships that aren't serving us for living in our most authentic way and in our highest self? It takes a level of being authentic with oneself to then question, are we showing up in our relationships outside of ourselves in authentic ways? So, that would be my vision for utopia, in that starting with self, personal relationships, community, family relationships, community relationships, and then work relationships, that we're able to show up and make decisions and resolve conflicts using authentic dialogue as the foundational communication framework instead of all the others.
Yes, digital confetti, dropping the mic. Everyone is like, yes. And remind us how we can connect with you, please.
Yes, growdialogue.com is our website. You can find us on LinkedIn at Grow Dialogue. You can find me on LinkedIn through my name, and also our Facebook page at Grow Dialogue. So at Grow Dialogue on Facebook, at Grow Dialogue on LinkedIn, Sunjata at growdialogue.com, and growdialogue.com. Please connect with us. Join our newsletter. We send out such good tidbits on LinkedIn and in our newsletter. Alicia, our relationship cultivation specialist who's on with us, she does a great job of creating content and engaging with professionals on LinkedIn and through our newsletter. So just shoot us an email or an inbox on LinkedIn to let us know that you would like to continue to be in relationship with us. And we'll make sure that you receive communication from us through our email and through all the things that we're putting out on Facebook and LinkedIn. So I really hope that we're able to continue our relationship for those of you who chose to join us virtually, and for those of you who are watching it later. Can't wait to hear from you all.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And I hope that we can continue this conversation online and offline another time. This has been so fruitful. So thank you, everyone, for your time.